Hey everybody, Wayne here. In today's overview interview, I'm taking a look at Corvette Command, the Battle of the Atlantic, 1941 to 43, designed by Alan Eagle and published by War Diary Publications. This is a narrative-driven, solitaire-designed wargame. In Corvette Command, you command a Flower-class Corvette all the way across the Atlantic during World War II, escorting convoys of supply ships while dodging U-boats and bad weather. Let's do a quick overview. I have a playthrough video for an in-depth look at the game. I'll cover my pros and cons and line up my final thoughts. All right, let's get on the table. All right, let's do an overview of the board, the map, the Corvette boxes, run through the sequence of play, sort of the combat system, length of game, and then victory and defeat towards the end. All right, starting off, I have everything set up here for an initial game other than the assignment order and then the convoy card, which I'll run through shortly. So looking at the map here, you can see everything from looking at the top, you have the different location boxes. There are the different ports of Halifax, St. John's, and Liverpool. You're going to be drawing a convoy card, and you're going to be escorting your convoy in between two of the ports, one on North America to Liverpool in England, and then back again to one of those ports. During the process of traveling, you're going to be visiting the different sectors. You have the Canadian sector here with the Canadian flag, you have these air gap sectors, and you have the western approaches here with the English flag. Each of these, when you move into them, you're going to flip them over and reveal either a U-boat, which means you're going to encounter a U-boat, nothing's going to happen, or a random event. In addition to that, there's going to be multiple things that are possibly going to happen as you are traveling, dealing with weather and then random maintenance. Continuing to look at the board before we dive into the sequence play, you have your Flower class Corvette here. You have range markers to tell where a U-boat, when they are encountered, will be in the range, whether they are attacking from long, medium, or short, and then when they are traveling in between and you're trying to chase them down, detect them, and chase them down. You have spots for hull damage, take up to 3 hull damage. Once you take the third, your ship is sunk. You have crew skill levels, so you have crew on a 4-inch gun, your anti-aircraft gun, depth charges, lookout, engineer, and A-stick, which is sonar. Later on in the war, so starting in September 41, you get radar. October 42, you get the Hedgehog. And November 42, you get the HDDF. So starting at the beginning of the war, you are the weakest compared to the U-boats. Later on, after November of 42, you are the strongest. When you detect U-boats and you're able to get into close range or short range, it's printed on here, you get to launch depth charges, so you will keep track of that with this counter in this box here. From space to space, you keep track of the weather, whether it's good, poor, fog, or snow, and violent storm. Of course, there will be modifiers, right, to combat and things like that. You have some helpful charts for the sonar detection and U-boat attack. And really importantly here, you have this box here, this active-passive box. This is where you're making skill checks with whoever is sort of the proactive player, the attacker, the active player versus the passive, the reactive, the defender. So for example, if you have a 5 skill against a 3 skill, you just find the 5, go down to where the 3 is, it meets up at 12. You would roll a 1d20 and try to get a 12 or less. Lower numbers are better, that number or lower. When you're encountering U-boats, you have cards for them. You will flip the U-boat over, or flip the card over, excuse me. It'll tell you what type of U-boat. It'll tell you where they're going to start attacking from. In this case, he'll start at medium. He can attack at medium and close range. He has an attack of skill of 5 and an evade skill of 5. And this is where you just put any damage on him. There are 2 different types of U-boats, and the numbers for their attacks and evasion will be different for all of them, so you don't know exactly how strong or weak, how effective that particular U-boat is going to be. When you're going through the combat, you're going to be trying to, if they start out, you're going to roll to start off to see if they're on the surface or not. They may start on the surface, in which case you could try to conduct a lookout check to see if you detect them. If so, you could shoot at them with your 4-inch gun and your AA gun, depending on the range. If you don't detect them, they are going to submerge and they're going to start launching torpedoes. They're going to launch 3 or 4 attacks, depending on the type of U-boat. While this is happening, you're going to be trying to spot them with your sonar or other abilities if you have it. You're going to be trying, once you do detect them, if you do, you get to go ahead and move closer. If you get them into close range / short range, you get to then drop depth charges on them. If you don't successfully do that and get them damaged or sink them, they're going to try to leave and summon a wolf pack. You'll roll on a chart to see if they're able to successfully summon a wolf pack, which means you may have additional U-boats, if they get away, coming after you, all within that same sector, that same area. You get to the end, you travel all the way through, you have your convoy. And by the way, the U-boats, of course, they're shooting at primarily the convoy ships, sinking them, but they may shoot at you. Watch my playthrough for a look at that, see when that happens. Otherwise, you're trying to get your convoy to the end. You're checking your tonnage that survives, or I should say checking the tonnage that actually sinks, and then comparing it to a victory point chart. If it is a single convoy game, a quick play game, or if you're doing an entire campaign, you're just going to go back and forth, keeping track of everything over a long period of time. Okay, sequence of play, we're going through that quick. So starting off, you'll be naming your ship. So you know, give yourself your ship and your captain a name. There are different charts. The game comes with one, basically this one. And then there are others, though, on Board Game Geek. I definitely recommend you check those out. I recommend you check out a lot of things on Board Game Geek. But then you just would keep track of what port, what date, how many vessels are in your convoy, what happens each day. If you're familiar with narrative-driven games, you'll be very familiar with this type of logbook. You're rolling for your skill for each of your crew members to start off with. They will gain skill over time. That's the RPG part of it. You set up the game map with, the cards, with the counters and the locations, with all of these which are randomized. So you never know exactly what's going to be in each location. You are going to draw a convoy card, like I mentioned before. That's going to tell you, first off, the speed of your convoy, fast or slow. And it's going to tell you, hey, where are you traveling from? Say in this card's case, from Halifax to Liverpool, or from Liverpool to Halifax. And then you're going to roll to determine your convoy size, how many ships are in the convoy. Then you draw an assignment order. The assignment order is going to tell you how to approach when you're approaching Liverpool. So you say, or when you're leaving. So in this case, in the Northern Channel, which means you don't just head straight out or any way you want. You're going to you have to follow this path. So you have to go out, up, and then over from there. And then you can take off and travel whatever path you want. After that, you are determining the starting weather. So you're rolling. Is it good, poor, fog, or snow, or violent storm? And then you go ahead and get into the sort of the turn phases where you're running through each turn. Each turn, you're going to move your convoy. Say you're here in Halifax, you're moving to this location next to it in the Canadian sector. Before you go ahead and flip over the sector counter, determine the weather. Weather, you go ahead and you just roll a positive die and a negative die. If it's positive, weather gets better. If it's equal, then negative weather stays as wherever it was at. And if it's a negative, then it doesn't go by more than one, but it would move one over to the right, and so it gets to the worst one, violent storm. After that, you check for a mechanical breakdown. So roll a 1d20. If you get a 1, unless you're in violent storm, then it's a 1 or 2, then you will suffer a mechanical breakdown. Again, check my playthrough video, because, of course, my luck, that's what happened. And then finally, you reveal the counter, and that's where you're going to get blank, like I showed you here, possibly U-boat. Well, if you get that, it is a U-boat, or a random event. U-boat, like I said, you're drawing a card, placing them wherever in the location, and then conducting the whole process of U-boat attack sequence, and then you responding. Random event, you go ahead and you have a chart here with 20 to roll any 20. You have 20 different random events that could happen. All kinds of different fun things. Many of them, of course, negative and hurtful to you. After you have figured out what happens in that sector, you can go ahead and roll for any repairs if you have any damages, and then you move to a new sector and you keep that going. Keep track of everything on your logbook. When you get to port, you go ahead and fix everything on your ship. Go ahead and check. You roll a number, compare it to roll a 1d20, compare it to the number of convoy ships sunk. Keep a tally of all the amount of ships and the tonnage that's sunk. And after every third convoy, you're going to roll to see if your skills are going to increase, your crew skills. If they have used those skills before, it's possible that they increase and get more skillful over time. So if you start off early and you work your way through, assuming your Corvette survives, your crews could be highly skilled. Starts off at 1 or 2 generally, up to 3 if you do one-off, but they can go all the way up to 6. So you just keep track of them by rotating like this. Okay, I think that explains the game. That covers the actual overview of the playthrough. Again, check my playthrough. I ran through pretty much everything. well, you'll see what happens to me. It's really, it's something. That's my classic luck especially when I'm filming videos. But I did sort of make sure I covered a bunch of stuff so you guys would see different aspects of this game in action, at least as far as I'm aware of how it works. Because with this rulebook and the player aids and everything, I'm not sure I know how to play this freaking game. But I'm going to cover that in my pros and cons. Let's go ahead and dive in. As always, cons first. All right, first off, these are some of the worst rulebooks and player aids I have ever seen. The rulebook does a poor job teaching the game, and an even worse job as a reference manual. The player aids are incomplete and often just plain incorrect. Where to even begin? Look at these player aids. Ignoring the fact that they're ugly as sin, the U-boat flowchart is printed as wrong in multiple places. First, if the U-boat is on the surface, you actually get a detection and a gun attack before the U-boat gets to attack. And second, this arrow here that was printed is actually wrong. So I had to write in for the surface attack. I had to cross out this arrow as best as I could on here. And then eventually I actually gave up entirely on this, and I downloaded someone else's fan one that they put on Board Game Geek. So I highly recommend you do that, first of all, so don't even worry about this in the first place. Second, you can see that this the player aid for the mechanical failure, the numbers here are wrong. So they had 20. It's actually supposed to be a 1. And here was 19 or 20. It's supposed to be 1 or 2. So I corrected them myself. And then secondly, or third, I should say, the sequence of play. Talking about ugly. First off, just the formatting, general look of it's terrible. Secondly, what the hell happened here? Because this is just, basically, you're running through, okay? You move the convoys, move one sector, determine weather, right? Apply weather, roll for mechanical breakdown, reveal underside. Why is it over there with the period in front of it? Like, clearly a formatting issue, right? Like, okay, no big deal, but why does it look like this? You're telling me nobody looked at it before it went to print and they look like this now because of that? Nobody failed to check that? Like, one quick glance and you would see that. Okay. Now, let's get to the rulebook itself. So the rulebook itself, it talks about things like tasks and skills, and the numbers can get confusing. For example, the rulebook will talk about a U-boat attack. U-boat attack skills are the numbers on the cards, but I can't find that defined anywhere in the rulebook. Instead, the rulebook will often use a generic task 4 when it first initially talks about using skills. It just gets confusing because what's a task 4? Is that a normal task? What are we talking? Is that how the average is? Is that everything? Is that different? It's not everything, clearly, because there's different numbers in the game. Well, yeah, the 4 just is not a real base number. It's just an example, but it's very confusing as it is in the rulebook. Also, there are no rules for keeping track of time passing, or what actual date the game begins, or what day of the month new technology become available. You just have to figure it out yourself. You have to download your own logs. You have to figure out things. You have to get scratch paper. Nothing that comes in the rulebook or in the box teaches you that. Setup of sectors itself is also not clearly defined in the beginning, especially the sector boxes that are shaded multiple colors. So there are these air gap ones that are related to, if I can find them here, you can see where there's multiple colors. Well, those are related to what year you're playing in, what month and year. Basically, is an air cover advanced enough, or the aircraft advanced enough to cover those, or is it going to remain the air gap areas? Well, that's not really covered in detail, again, in the rule book, which is, again, something it should have been. Finally, there is a sheet that contains glossary, clarifications, errata that was emailed to me and presumably other purchasers of the game by the publisher, and yet I can't seem to find it on either their publisher website or uploaded to a commonly used website like Board Game Geek. And if it's there, I haven't seen it anytime recently. So I have it, yay me. What about someone else purchasing the game now? The second thing I want to mention is the map board and the counters. While I love the artistic design, and I'll talk about that in my pros, it's not without its mistakes as well. Look at the depth charge pattern boxes and look at the counter for it. Why is it so much smaller? Why aren't the boxes either bigger or this counter smaller? You're telling me you couldn't have moved, say, the weather box up there, over here, over there, anywhere else, and maybe increase the size of the depth charge pattern? Because now this counter, instead of sitting kind of in the middle, you're not going to tell exactly what it is. You kind of have to put it in the corner and make sure it stays right in the corner to make sure you know exactly how many depth charges you have left. Also, the range box. It shows long, medium, and short ranges. Yet the game, from the rules to the U-boat cards, does not use the term short range. It uses the term close range. You can see the C on the U-boat cards as an example. That stands for close range. The counters look nice, much like the board, but the actual counter makeup could have been improved. The U-boat counter that you place to show range, right here, has two sides printed, but they're the exact same. Instead, one side should show the U-boat's surface, the other side should show it submerged. There are +1 counters, but there are no -1 counters. So when a U-boat has a negative skill or something like that, you need to use something else to figure out. I end up using these extra crew skill counters, and maybe that's what they're for, but nowhere in the rulebook does it say to do that. Also, comes to damage, there are only 4 of these damage counters, and you take up to 3. Well, third you're sunk, so really you would only use 2. So you could put more on the U-boat, but that's not enough because they can take up to 4. So do we get 2 more? Should I can't use one of the dice to come with the game because you need all those for the different rollings, I wish there had been, it would have been nice to have more of those you could place on your Corvette and the attacking U-boats that take damage. Finally, narrative-driven games are often criticized for not giving you enough player agency, not having meaningful choices to make. Instead, you're often rolling a die and just determining a result based on that die roll. Corvette Command takes that to the next level. There are literally, and I mean literally, no choices to be made in the game that have any meaning. Setup, all random, from crew skills to the map, to the cards, to the convoy. Movement, you get to pick your path, but as every sector or point on the map, whether in the Canadian sector, air gap, or western approaches, has a face-down sector counter, it's meaningless. You could actually just be drawing from 3 draw cups and placing them as you go. You have no way of scouting ahead or trying to dodge obstacles in your path. Weather is random. Mechanical failure is random. Random events are, well, not to be too big of a smartass, random. U-boat attacks are completely random, and any choices you have are not choices at all. For example, if a surface U-boat is detected, the rules say your ship's guns may attempt to engage. The word may sounds nice, right? That's a choice. But guess what? There's absolutely no negative firing. You don't keep track of ammunition for the gun. You don't have a chance of a gun malfunction if it's fired too often. Nothing. The Corvette action section of the rulebook explains your actions. Guess what they are? Roll to determine the position of the U-boat, roll through a depth charge attack, etc. There is one actual choice in the game, and it's in this section after you have damaged a U-boat enough. If it floats to the surface in the crew abandoned ship, you can attempt recovery of the Enigma machine and the code books. You choose your boarding party, you roll a 1d20, a 20 means you're successful, a 1 means the U-boat sinks, taking whatever officer you sent in the boarding party with it. Repairing damage says you may attempt, but there's no negative to trying, so there's no real choice. If you're damaged, you should attempt every sector. Once you arrive at the port, you roll some more dice, you draw a new convoy assignment card, continue on. In a different narrative-driven game, say where you control a U-boat or a B-17 bomber, you at least have choices such as at what range or altitude to conduct your attacks, how much should you push your luck before you give up and turn around or seek a new target. In Corvette Command, since you were on the defensive against U-boat attacks that the system generates completely randomly, you don't even have that option. They appear according to the cards, you roll dice for detection attacks, and you see what the result is. There simply aren't any choices to be made here. Okay, that's it for the cons. On to my few pros. All right, first off, I slammed the lack of meaningful player choices, and I definitely stand by that criticism. But there is, a little bit of fun to be had building a narrative in this game. Even with the randomness and luck, without any ability to mitigate it, it has a certain charm, right, to its own as you work your way across the Atlantic and hope you don't run into any wolf packs of U-boats. It's kind of like writing a book by rolling dice. Second, I am glad to see a game that's not about U-boats and instead tries to give you a different perspective. There are far too few games looking at the Battle of the Atlantic from the convoy escort perspective. and it's appreciated. Third, as far as I'm aware, the simulation aspect of Corvette Command is historically accurate. The U-boats make attack runs. You're attempting to detect them first visually, and then using any technology you have available once they're submerged. If you're detected and you're close enough, you can make gun or depth charge attacks on them. And if not, the U-boats will carry out attack runs on the convoy until you either drive them off or they break contact and attempt to summon a wolf pack so they can come back and sink more ships. And of course, there are the RPG aspects like crew skill levels and recording stats and tonnage, for kills and how much has been sunk and how much has survived each of your convoys. Finally, I do like that there are rules for both a campaign and then one-off games. The campaign is going to take a long time to play as you play out an entire 2 years, and it's a surprisingly short amount of time gets burned in between its downtime. So you're going to spend a lot. You're going to play a lot. But a single convoy does play out in a pretty quick amount of time, maybe an hour on average, although that can vary significantly based on how lucky or unlucky you are. First of all, if your ship survives, but mainly when you're encountering U-boats, how many you encounter, and then if you're able to get away and summon wolf packs. So, and also you can adjust the difficulty of the one-off convoys by changing your start date. Right? Early in the war, you don't have a lot of options against the U-boats, just your sonar and depth charges. Later in the war, your Corvette will become outfitted with radar, the HDDF, and the Hedgehogs. All right, that's it for my pros and cons. Let's end with my final thoughts. I wanted to like Corvette Command once I saw this attractive board on my table. I mean, look at this bad boy. This game looks good. The map, the play area, the counters, the cards, everything has a really clean, attractive look. There's color on your Corvette, but there's not a distracting amount of color on the actual playboard. I think everything looks really clean. Graphic design is fantastic. But between the lack of choices and this simply atrocious rulebook and player aids here, I could not bring myself to enjoy the experience. I can't tell you how many times I almost gave up just learning the game and playing it enough to do this review, simply because the rulebook is such a slog. In all honesty, I still don't know if I've been playing the game correctly. And considering how terrible the rulebook is, I don't even feel bad about it. In any case, I decided to power through in case there was a good game underneath this mess. Unfortunately, as I made clear in my cons, there isn't a good game here. There's a decent storytelling machine, and if you want to roll dice and read results and do nothing but that, then Corvette Command may be a good choice for you. But if you want a rich, meaningful, narrative-driven game that gives you a complete experience, go check out The Hunters or Target for Today. Corvette Command, unlike those games, won't be sticking around on my game shelf. I don't enjoy being so critical of a war game, and I can only imagine the amount of work Alan Eagle put into his design. You can tell he has a passion for the subject. However, Corvette Command is, in my opinion, just the most recent example of where a game developer, one with real power to influence the rulebook and game design, would have been invaluable. If Corvette Command had that, I have no doubt my experience would have turned out much differently. As it is, I can't in good conscience recommend Corvette Command to anyone. Alright, thank you to everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video review. Please let me know what you think of my video and this game in the comments below. And until next time, everyone, later.